There, it worked. Welcome, your backup plan tribe, to another great podcast brought to you by Tina. If you are new here, my name is Tina again. I am with Talking Taboo with Tina with your backup plan. I am an emergency preparedness coach, a best-selling author of In the Blink of an Eye. Yes. Do you remember Jeannie? That's how fast things can happen. And our guest today is going to tell you exactly how fast in the blink of an eye is. I am a financial expert and an app developer of Your Backup Plan app, and I'm located here in beautiful Vancouver, BC. So welcome to the show today. If you are new to our show, welcome. And if you are a returning watcher and lover of our show, thank you for coming. I get my hand out. Please like, share, and subscribe down here at the bottom. Press on that like button, press on that subscribe button so you can reach out to more and more people with our show. Because if you are here, if you've found us, you found us for a reason, because we have some great shows of, real raw conversation with our guests about their life-changing journey and their life. What is your backup plan app? Anyways, Tina, your backup plan app puts your life all into one place in case of any unpredictable circumstance. And it takes that painful aftermath out of that tragedy, because you are left with this moment of trauma. And what do? In that second, in that millisecond, your life changes in a quick second. And what does that look like if you're not prepared? What does that possibly look like if you don't know what the future is going to look like? And it changes your life. And Mike Tyson says in his famous quote, "Everyone has a plan till you get punched in the mouth." But do we have a plan? Well, I think most people think they have a plan. They might have a will. They might have a power of attorney. They might have what people in the global world call a living will. They may have those types of things. But do they have all the rest, all the other key components put together in their family plan? Their wishes, what they'd like if something happened to them, would they like to go in a home? Would they like to stay in with somebody else or by themselves, or have caregivers come in? All of these thoughts don't really come to us until something happens. And then it's too late to make those decisions. So with our guest today, I'm so very, very excited about having Melissa Miller come on. She's from Southern Idaho, and I'm just going to bring her on and introduce her. Hi.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome, Melissa. You're coming from Southern Idaho in the United States today. She is a mom mentor and a caregiver support coach. It's quite a mouthful. And our show today is From Lover to Nurse. And that's the truth. Melissa, before you start with your story, I wanted to explain a situation I had with a very dear client of mine a few years ago, who had a husband with dementia. But it was a very crippling and very fast dementia. And he was incapable of being his usual self, her husband. So she had to make this decision, and it took her a year at the age of 60 to make a decision like that. What do I do? Do I stay as his wife and be a caregiver? Or do I put him in a home and then, have a life at 60 for myself? And it's such a hard decision, even without children or just by yourself, and what the right thing to do is. So with your story today, I'm so excited to bring it to the forefront of our listeners to talk about, what happened at the beginning of your journey. Where did this all start for you, Melissa?
Yes, and a little piggyback story on that real quick is my former career background is as a certified nursing assistant, and I did primarily work in long-term care facilities. So I did work with the elderly dementia population, and you're right, dementia is very, very crippling, and it can be fast, it can be slow, but whether it's fast and sudden, where you
Yeah.
suddenly aren't recognized by your loved ones anymore, or it's a slow process where you just slowly see their memory, they're losing more and more information around their life, their family. Either situation's hard. And to place your loved one in a home is really tough
Yeah.
because you feel this guilt, you feel this shame of neglecting your loved one, that you're doing it out of selfishness or anything else. And I want to say, if you're in that situation, you're not being selfish. Caregiving is rough physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And I want you to hear from me as a former healthcare worker that that people in the healthcare field are trained to deal with these situations. And certainly we have more training and coping skills to handle these situations on a daily basis, but you don't. And if
Yeah,
it's not
true.
within your capacity to
And
care for your
knowledge.
loved one, and knowledge, yes, to care for your loved one, please do not hesitate to make that decision if it's best for you and the rest of the family to do that. Now, a backstory on me as well is my grandmother passed away in 2018, and she absolutely refused to go into her home. And we honored that because she had been there so much for us. We wanted to take care of her. So we were in a capacity where we could take turns taking care of her. We would have her come live with us. We would go and stay in her house and just take turns taking care of her. We did get hospice and home health involved. And once she was to the point where she was definitely more in the stage of hospice,
Yeah.
the hospice and home health staff would be just kept in the loop about the schedule, about where she would be so they could still come pay visits to her. And also too, home health and hospice is obviously a great resource in and of itself because there usually is a social worker, and you as the family of the sick loved one can access that resource. One of my cousins, she was definitely having a hard time when we were dealing with our grandmother's transition from life to end of life. And she had some hard feelings about that. Not bad, like, it was normal, but she needed some
Yeah.
extra cope with it. So she utilized that social worker. Think of it as an opportunity to not just make sure your loved one is cared for, but that you and your family as a whole are cared for physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, with your story, Melissa, I understand you had quite the moment that I talked about in the blink of an eye. It was
Yeah.
probably even quicker than that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We went from not thinking anything of this situation to totally changing our life in less than 6 months. It was really fast. So my husband has epilepsy, but he wasn't diagnosed right away. And in the beginning, we didn't even know that it was epilepsy. We woke up at 4:30 in the morning to change our daughter's diaper. This was back in December of 2019. And
And
I
she was
stepped
about
up.
a year old, right, at
Yeah,
that
she was
time?
about a
Yeah.
year old because her birthday's in January. So she was going to turn 1 in January of 2020. And we just woke up to change her diaper. I stepped out of the room to use the bathroom or something. And then I came back in to just make sure my husband was okay and they didn't need help tending to our daughter. But I noticed a weird look on his face. It was like this weird glazed look over his face, like he was kind of there or kind of was about to not be there. And I asked him, I
Like
said,
blank, kind of
yeah,
like a blank
yes,
look.
absolutely.
Kind of like when you faint or something, that kind of look.
Very good. That's a good description. Definitely like that. And I asked him, are you okay? And he got 3 words out. I don't know. He passed out. I grabbed our daughter just in time, got her into the crib. She was wailing because she was scared to see her father fall. I was freaking out. I did not think it was epilepsy in the beginning. I thought it was more just because there is almost a 20-year age gap between my husband and I. I'm in my latter 30s. My husband's in his mid 50s now. When this started, he was in his early 50s. So I thought, okay, he's working 40 plus hours a week, parenting a toddler An almost 1-year-old when you're
Yeah.
in your early 50s is a lot different. So I thought it was something that, with thinking with my medical training in my brain, that, oh, we just need to probably maybe supplement him with some extra sleep, some better nutrition, maybe supplement a chemical imbalance, maybe some supplements. Nothing like epilepsy. We never thought it'd be like that. But he did have 2 more episodes. He had one in January of 2020 and one in March of 2020. And by that time, his primary doctor had referred us to a general neurologist because he was catching on that maybe this could be something neurological. It's not my basket of expertise, so I want to send you off to a neurologist just to be sure. Thank
Yeah.
God he did. But then
What was
April
the
of
what was your first one like, Melissa? What was that initial like, is he lying on the floor and
he just passed out.
out of
He
it
just
like a
passed. He was
faint
just
kind of like?
yeah. And then when he came to, he had no clue of what happened.
So it could have been a faint, like somebody could
Yeah,
have fainted.
and that's why I was thinking with my medical brain, maybe he just has a chemical imbalance. He's low on like iron or vitamin
Well,
D or something. Yeah, something
thank
like
goodness
that.
you weren't driving, or he wasn't driving or something like that. I
Absolutely.
mean, there's so many pros uh, for what happened. That kind of.
Absolutely. And the cool thing was too is that um the cool thing was that I was there and I'm medically trained, so I knew kind of what to do. We didn't know it was a seizure. I just thought he fainted because he was just tired and
Yeah,
exhausted,
yeah.
something else going on. But I'm glad I was there, because I was able to give details when we did go to the ER to get him checked out to make sure nothing was wrong. But they referred us to his primary, and then our primary referred us to a neurologist. He had a couple more episodes in, like I said, January and March. Then in April was the turning point. That was the first month that he blew through his first medication. By the end of the month, he was having 10 to 20 plus seizures a month.
Oh
And
dear.
it was bad.
All of the same kind, like this.
Oh yeah.
He would
Oh
do
yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah. It's like, well, there was some where he'd be like just kind of glazed and out of it. And then there's others like, it would happen in his sleep, or it would happen where he would pass out or just wouldn't come to. So it was a variety. His symptoms have been the same. Like usually he gets immediate, sudden, painful left temporal pain in his left temple. But in terms of how it starts, sometimes he can feel it coming on, that something's going on, like he just feels off. Other times he's out cold and he just passes out. Other times it's in his sleep or something. So it
Right.
can happen in
So
many
you'd
ways,
wake
shapes, and
up
forms.
feeling different too, I guess, after.
Well,
If
if
it
I
was in
couldn't
your
get him,
sleep.
well, usually the ones that where he's sleeping, it's because I usually need to go in and wake him up to get him up for work or something like that. Or I hear him making a funny noise, and if I can't get him to respond, I'm giving him his rescue medication to help him come out because I know what's going on.
Yeah. I, as a very young child, I remember being in a motel and then the lobby, and a girl had come in. She was about 29 or so, and she just fell to the ground and started doing the shaky stuff. And as a child, like you were going to talk about your little one, it's scary. Like,
It's very
they
scary.
don't just lie there and do nothing. Like I
Right,
guess some of
right.
them do, but
Everyone's different. Some people will
yeah,
have, it's not like you see in movies. Not everyone shakes. Not everyone foams at the mouth. Everyone has different symptoms. My husband, sometimes he just has rigid. Some of the ones he's been having, he's just been rigid, just really tense. And he's so tight and his hands just grip to where it looks like he's going to break his hand or something.
oh,
So it's different.
and does
It's
that
different.
stay like that for a long time?
Just through the seizure, and then he'll relax once the seizure has passed.
And how long
So
does a seizure? Usually the same?
it can vary. I clock them. If they go over 5 minutes, I'm calling 911 and taking it and transporting them to the hospital because of damage. Because you remember, it's a firestorm. Now, sometimes they come out of it pretty quick. But if the seizure the grounds for calling 911 or taking him into the ER would be if he falls when he has a seizure, like what happened a couple weeks ago. He fell when he was trying to get something. He just went to the microwave. He was getting a cup of coffee. I happened to walk out of my office just in the nick of time. I saw him. He had just closed the door to the microwave to warm up some coffee, and he fell backwards. He just had sudden temple pain. He didn't say anything. He fell backwards. He's 6'2" and 190 pounds. So that's a long way to fall and a lot of
Yeah.
weight. And he hit the back of his head. So that was grounds. I took him into the ER. Since I'm his caregiver and his wife, I gave him all the the stats and details about what his journey has been like. And they said, you did the right thing. So I said, we're going to, follow up with your neurologist. His test came back clean, no signs of a concussion. But because he has epilepsy, and he felt, we obviously want to be proactive with
Yeah.
protecting his brain. So grounds for hitting. So worrying about a concussion if he falls and hits his head, or if the seizure again goes longer than 5 minutes, then I'm calling 911.
Right. I know is there a certain feeling when it happens? Is there, for you being part of this, like, is there, I know this is going to sound really strange, but is there like a smell, or is there a sound, or a feeling, or anything at
No,
all?
I'm just watching his behavior. Sometimes, it's in the blink of an eye, like you said. Sometimes I have some warning that he's telling me verbally that he's feeling off, and
Like
so
it
I'll give him,
hurts or something?
yeah, like like, or I see him grabbing his temple, or he's just all of a sudden having a glazed look, like that first seizure. Then I know something's going down.
Right.
Other times, like I said, it just caught us off guard. Like the one he's had a total of three over the weekend, and he had one. The last one he had was he just was sitting at the couch. We were having a conversation. He was sitting on the couch and watching TV, and I was in the kitchen. We have an open concept kitchen, and I was just doing something like in the sink. And all of a sudden, I noticed he wasn't responding to our conversation. We weren't arguing anything. We were just having a conversation. And I
Yeah.
went around, and he was slumped over and shaking and out. So I went and got my medication and started taking care of him right away.
Do you inject them, or is it a pill?
It depends. So obviously, if they're out cold, you do not put anything in their mouth. And so if he's alert enough ahead of time, they can tell me that he's feeling off. I give him a certain medication, which is in a pill form. If he's out cold, I give him his nasal spray. Or
Oh,
if
I
he's not
see.
responding to, because obviously you don't want to wait till he wakes up to give him something. You want
Yeah.
something in him right away.
Yeah. And how long has epilepsy been around, Melissa? Do you know all that background?
I don't know that background. It's interesting. Since this journey started, I've been getting on Instagram to share my story, and it's been interesting. I've been able to find a lot of other accounts that of people that are dealing with epilepsy. So I'm finding resources, and it's really interesting. And there's some stuff even back to the Bible where they talk about, there was a passage or some historical stuff that someone found about how the document or section talked about how someone was describing the look of feeling possessed, but actually it was probably epilepsy. It was probably a seizure. So I don't know so it's probably been around since the dawn of time.
Yeah.
But in terms of in our day and age, it's still a very misdiagnosed, misunderstood disease because there's just lack of knowledge around it. There's a lot of stigma. People think like, you look fine. My husband looks fine, and he's pretty high functioning. When he's not having a seizure, he can feed, dress, and bathe himself. And he can work. But he works a limited number of hours now because stress is a trigger for epilepsy, or seizure disorders. Stress,
Yeah.
missing meds, lack of nutrition and sleep is a huge one, are the three main principal triggers. And so he doesn't work as much. So
That's pretty hard as a father and a work, somebody
he
who has
is
a job.
exactly. Well, and he is on Social Security disability. So in the States, if you are disabled, you can get, and that's how we're living. We do live off of his, because I transitioned home to be full time. So I quit my job and I'm building my
Yes.
career, but my career takes time.
Yes.
So we're dealing with
Those changes,
those
that whole
changes and living
income
off of his
change.
disability. And he's on a limit, and he cut back his hours, for his health. It's necessary and needed for his health. So it doesn't just impact you physically in terms of just how you were able to function and live, but it
Yeah.
impacts you financially, mentally, and emotionally. It's distressing, and even spiritually. Like I'm a Christian, speaking to my faith of what I choose to believe. I'm a Christian, and you do have those feelings, which are okay. You do ask God, why did this happen to my family, and help me cope through this situation, because I sure can't do it on my own. And so you are pushed. It hits all areas of your life.
It
You get
sure
hit
does.
you get hit in the mouth, like you were saying, in all areas.
Yes. And you know, it doesn't stop at this point either.
No, this will be lifelong. This will be going on until my husband dies. I will be
Yeah.
his caregiver until he dies.
And
It's not going to
so
stop because I'm not going to,
that's a
yeah,
hard decision for people to
it
make though.
is. Yeah. As of right now, and I'm just going to leverage home health or hospice when the time, if I have to. I'm not going to put my husband in a home. I want I want to take care of
Here.
him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you want to be.
Yeah.
And
So,
so your
and
daughter's even learning how to spot him and
yep, when
at
he doesn't
3.
respond, when he starts to moan or groan or passes out and is not responsive, she knows to come and get me at 3.5 years old, which is really sad. But she knows, it's been going on and I hate that burden has been laid on her.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a blessing, kind of in a way too, to
Yeah. I mean, I do.
understand the world. I mean,
Yeah.
in some form, but yeah, it's kind of beautiful that she can
Yeah.
acknowledge that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, what a position to put a little kind of kid into
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
I had I was I had heard about a girl who was going to university and she had a pig that the
Mm-hmm.
pig would tell her when she was going to have a seizure.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess there's tools like that as well for
Yeah.
people.
Right. We haven't utilized anything like that. I do have strong dander pet issues. So like we do have a cat, but she does come inside sometimes, but I have to be careful. And then, she lives outside a lot. But yeah, we don't, but we've only lived with my dad in the house we live now. We live with my dad because we moved in when my mom passed away after 50 years of chronic illness.
Oh,
So it's reversed. My dad was the caregiver for my mom, and I'm the caregiver for my husband. So
isn't that kind of funny?
yeah,
How it switched.
it's switched. So anyway, but yeah, so we live with my father, and I'm also helping caregive for him too because he is over 65. And that's the thing. With the age demographic, we do anticipate caring for our grandparents and our parents because of the age demographic, the age gap.
Yes.
We anticipate
Yes.
that and we're
Yes.
prepared for that. And I'm not saying that resources and everything like that are not warranted and needed, but caregiving can happen at a younger age. It really can. And you don't have to be, we anticipate starting to care for our spouse or partner after age 65 because that's typically when health problems do start to kind of trickle in.
Yeah.
But we don't anticipate
Unfortunately.
it, unfortunately, but we don't anticipate it, when you're young and in your prime in your mid 30s or 50s. So
No.
it can
30s, 40s.
happen
Yes, absolutely.
when you still have
Well,
small kids, like I definitely, because of the almost 20-year age gap, I anticipate after our daughter was raised and graduated from high school that I would be actively caregiving for my husband at the time, at that
yes.
stage and season, which I was ready for and anticipated and accepted. Otherwise, I would have married him. but
Yes.
but no, it's happening sooner. We're
And
having to do it
because
sooner.
well, that's true. And have you thought of the situation now? Because if something happened to you, have you given any thought to what would happen with him and your daughter?
That's something I am having to think about. So yeah, that's something else we have to think about. It's just been so crazy with thinking
I
about
know. It
with
just,
everything else, on top of
yes.
everything else. Because I do have my own chronic illnesses. I have IBS, I have hypothyroidism, nothing that's life altering or life threatening. I
Yeah.
can't keep all those in check, but and it does impact my life as a mother and as a caregiver and a wife. So and a coach and a mentor in my business and stuff
Right.
and the
Right.
projects I do. But that is a thought. And that's the questions, those are the hard conversations that no one wants to have, but it's so
No.
necessary. How many stories have we come across where the unexpected happens and we weren't prepared?
Tons.
Yes, tons.
In so many
And
shapes and forms, whether it was your
right.
building or whether it was your car or whether it was your house or whether it was your belongings or whether it was yourself, like
Hmm.
it could be anything.
It could be anything. And having those conversations, Yeah, that's definitely something my husband and I are definitely going to be having to think about. We have godparents, but some of them live out of state. But we're definitely thinking of having and my husband has a daughter from his first marriage, but she's all the way in Missouri and she's living her life there. So we're definitely need to think about, who's going to take care of our little girl, if something happens. So, and that's
And
scary.
him.
And
And
him.
him.
Yeah. So,
And what you'd
yeah.
like to have done with your business, is it going to, continue making revenue, or would you want to put someone else as a partner in it, just
Yeah. I'm
to
thinking, yeah.
continue it? Or,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
so
I
many.
definitely plan on, I'm not to the stage where I have a team, but my goal is that I definitely would love a partner or a team member at some point, having a team to just do the day to day to run my business. But also I would love a partnership, and turning it into something else. But I haven't
Yeah.
gotten there. I'm just right now, I'm just trying to keep it's so overwhelming. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't think about those things, but I'm just
Yes.
taking it one day at a time. There's just so
Yes.
much going on and getting so far ahead. It is good to think ahead, but I think also too, there's that fine line of how far ahead do you need to look before it even happens. And then, because then that throws you into like anxiety and thinking like, oh gosh, I have to prepare for anything, and it just leaves you in that, you get out of the present. You don't absorb the moments being in the present, because being in the
Right.
present is never going to come again. So there's
Yes.
that fine line of being in the present, preparing for the unexpected, like what I teach in my programs, and then but also and being prepared, but also
Yes.
being in the present. So it's a fine line. I'm not saying that I have
Yes.
it all figured out, and sometimes,
Well,
and to some
no.
degree, all of us never will. But having for starters, having the conversations and thinking about these things and
Mhm.
realizing that there is resources to leverage is another component as well.
Well, especially when someone has that disability component,
Mm-hmm.
because in Canada, you cannot continue to have a disability pension or income from the
Mm-hmm.
government if you get any money from, like, a will or an inheritance. Your disability is totally cut off.
Mm.
Your stream of what's available to you is cut off. Your availability of an income stream is cut off. So you have to be really careful, and possibly make sure that your will and your estate planning is part of a trust. And
Yeah.
in the trust, then that can pay the disability to the continue to pay it to that person through that trust, but not through the estate.
Right.
So
But yeah,
it's
because in the
hard.
state, yeah, it's hard. Like in the state of Idaho and where I'm at, my husband gets Social Security disability. I get a little bit because I'm a caregiver for a disabled spouse, and
Yes.
we have a child under the age of 16 to 18. So, with that being said, I am my daughter's liaison. That if my husband does pass away, we will continue to get his pension until his Social Security benefits until she turns 16 to 18 years old. So,
Yes.
mhm. So
It's
yeah,
all of these things that.
it's all the rules. There's so many rules with these programs.
Yes.
And the thing in the states, I don't know how it works with sections within, if it's the overall country urging or if it's like sections. For us in the United States, we have states obviously,
Have
and
their own
some of
rules
these,
too.
yeah, some of these. So there is rules at the federal level for our government, but then
Yes.
there's also variations of some of these programs at the state level. So
That's
the
right.
rules. I mean, when I filled back in 2020, the summer of 2020, when we finally got his medical diagnosis in July of 2020. Oh my gosh, it was such a relief to finally qualify that he qualified for Social Security disability. So then that meant he could pull back his hours at work, and it's not enough to live on by itself, so that's why he still works part-time, and it's good for his mental health because he does want to
Yes.
feel like, because men are providers, men are fixers, and they want to feel like they're contributing
Yeah.
to providing for their family still, and I get that, and I totally respect that. So
As long
being able to get,
as
yeah,
possible too,
yeah, as
right?
long as possible, to be
Yeah.
able to feel like he's contributing to raising our family.
Yeah.
So I'm thankful that he can do that. So like I said, I'm lucky. My husband is pretty high functioning, but I know there's people out there that are caregiving for a spouse that are bedridden, and so they're doing way more.
Yeah.
They're doing a lot more of the ADL care, like I did when I was a certified nursing assistant, having to change, transfer, reposition, feed,
Feed.
bathe, dress,
Yeah.
everything,
Yeah.
beside and give medications. So and follow up with the medical team. So caregiving has many layers depending on the situation, but it can still be stressful and it still wears on you. So that's why
Yeah.
amping up your physical, mental, and emotional self-care and spiritual self-care is very important. I'm in a
Yes.
season where I'm really amping up my spiritual self-care. I found an amazing devotional series that I'm doing that started out, the people who are doing it that I found on Facebook, they started out it as just a 10-day program, but they're turning it into a year-long program. So I invested the $60 to get the year-long program, and I get lifetime access so I can go back to it again and again. And I'm investing in my spiritual health. That's what I need right now to cope with
Hmm.
the stresses that we are under. And for everyone else listening, whatever season of life you're in, whatever of the 4 areas, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, that you're weakest in, now's the time to amp up on that self-care so you can cope. So if it's maybe not doing devotional or getting back plugged into your congregation of faith, maybe it's realizing, you know what, all these coping techniques that I'm trying to do with dealing with my mental health on my own is just not cutting the mustard anymore. So
Yeah.
I am going to go and make an appointment with my therapist or counselor, because even though there's stigma around medication, but guys, when I was in my early 20s, I did go through a time where I had to be on some depressive medication and anxiety medicine for a while to be able to get stable again. And I don't regret that. So definitely leverage those resources. And remember too, it's not just the medication that's available through therapists and counselors. They are trained and they can offer referrals to other resources that the average doctor and your family or friends, or even your pastor or leader of faith,
Yeah.
doesn't have access to. Now, those resources are good, but sometimes, guys, there's definitely seasons and situations where you need other resources, and making sure that you can access those resources as fast as possible is critical. So if you
Yes,
are
that's for
needing help
sure.
with your mental health, definitely leveraging the resource of a counselor and therapist in itself for the benefit of medication, and even just access to more resources through them because they have access to those kinds of things is is not a bad thing. There's no shame, there's
Yeah.
no guilt. It doesn't make anything, it doesn't define you as a mother, a wife, or a caregiver. It just means that you're prioritizing your self-care so you can keep that cup full, so you
Yeah.
can be the wife, mother, and caregiver that you need to be, because that's what it's about.
Yes. Um, and sometimes we don't realize it, but they usually offer, one-on-one treatments or group sessions, or even like an evening at a restaurant group kind of, just
Yeah,
just socialization sometimes, like among the same type of people, your own type of group. Um, I think all
absolutely.
of those things could be helpful in so many ways.
Absolutely. As human beings, we're definitely a people of we're creatures where we need community. Community is so powerful and needed to being able to cope with whatever
Yeah.
situation we're in. So being around like-minded people, whether it's getting a mentor or coach like me who's can help you get organized and process and cope on the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual level as a spousal caregiver and a stay-at-home
Yeah.
mom, or if you're needing more spiritual help, maybe it's trying to plug into something, getting replugged back into your congregation of faith, doing a one-on-one with your pastor or leader of faith, or joining a spiritual group, or even doing something online, right? Like,
Online.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's no shame in that. The resources that have worked out for me have been online because I'm busy, I'm home full time, I can't get out of the house as often as I
Yeah.
would like to. And obviously, too, it's out of protection because I'm trying to limit exposure to some degree, because I have a compromised immune system to some degree. My husband certainly does with his epilepsy, and I have a 3
Yeah.
year old. So there you go. Things are opening back up here in the States, depending on where you're at and everything else. But still, you want to be safe. And obviously, just sometimes it's just more it's just more also of energy. You're just dealing with so much. When my husband has a seizure, he's out for the rest of the day. So he
Yeah.
doesn't have the energy to go outside the house.
How long does the effects after it's over of a
Well,
seizure?
it
Does it
probably is definitely
vary?
it varies, but it's definitely at least minimum is definitely 24 hours, and it can be longer. Because think about it, this is the best analogy that I've been able to come up with that makes sense when you go through when a person goes through a seizure, and if they go through multiple, it's even more. But whenever a person goes through a seizure, it's like they've just run a 26-mile marathon. Hello, you don't recover from that in a matter of minutes or hours.
No.
You're out for the rest of the day. You got to hydrate, you need to eat, you need to sleep, you need to rest, let your muscles heal. Same thing when your brain goes through a seizure. You have to rest. So my husband has, so one of the things that he does have to do more than anything is sleep and just, watch TV, relax, read his books, do something that's relaxing so he can recover. And obviously too, the other component too is the medication I give him. Most of his medications that he has, they can make you feel, obviously deal chemically with your mood and other things, but the other side effect is they'd make you drowsy. So he's sleepy because of the medication. He's sleepy because he's exhausted after what his brain has just gone through. And it impacts his whole body. It happened in his brain, but it impacts his whole body.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
What could it possibly be a seizure where he doesn't come out of it? Is that always a risk?
That's why I clock them. That's why the protocol for when someone has a seizure, if they don't, you got to clock them. So if they don't come out of it after 5 minutes, you're calling 911 and getting them transported to the hospital ASAP. If they hit their head, then there's that component of a concussion.
Right.
But yeah, if it goes longer than 5 minutes, you are calling 911.
So what happens, Melissa, if you have to go out for the day?
I take my daughter with me. I don't have a lot of options. I do utilize family, but I try to keep going out for the day to a minimum where I'm not gone too long. I hate leaving the house because my husband's by himself. But I try to keep it to a minimum, and make arrangements to have people here. But that's not always possible because I have family that has, family in their lives, and we're in a situation. Usually my dad is here though, because we live with my dad, but he's on vacation right now. So I'm kind of in a little bit of a pickle, and I have other family that's out of town right now. But usually I try to make arrangements when I know I'm going to have to be gone for the day for a long period of time. You know,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you can't leave him, if you can't take his time of something happening.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah. He can't give him, when he has a seizure, whether he's just, out cold or he's just kind of off, he can't always take his medication. Now again, he takes, I give him Nasalem if he's out cold, but if he's, just feeling off and he's alert enough beforehand, he can take some lorazepam as a rescue. But sometimes he can't even get to that. And so then I have to give him the nasal spray anyway, because that you want the medication in his system the fastest way possible. And it's better to give him the nasal spray and stop, because the Nasalem has a longer shelf life than the lorazepam. The lorazepam has a 12-hour window. So the idea with rescue medication, it's helped to stop the seizure and prevent another subsequent episode from happening. And right now we're even adding clonazepam for a while, because he is transitioning off of zomethazine onto Xcopri for stabilization to help his seizures, because the zomethazine is not working. And we're trying to get him stabilized enough so we can start the testing process for surgery. So there's all these components. So we're amping up on, trying to get him stabilized on the Xcopri. We're adding the clonazepam at nighttime to help him have a little extra, because it has a 36-hour window, whereas whereas the lorazepam only has a 12-hour window. So if he takes it, say, like, let's see, it's like 12:15 my time. So if he takes it now, by by midnight tonight, it's going to be gone. So he has no more protection for the night. Whereas if he takes the clonazepam at bedtime before he goes to sleep, it'll last him through the morning and kind of help give him so he can be protected overnight. So until he gets to the next nighttime dose.
So he has to do that every night. And
he takes right now. Yeah. So the clonazepam he takes right now, it's temporary. It's just until we get him stabilized at the right dose of the Xcopri. So he takes that Xcopri at night, a dose of that. He's on 100 milligrams of that. He takes 600 milligrams of the methazine right now, even though it's not working. We can't just stop a medicine and start another one, because there is some component of protection by at least staying on the zomethazine until we get him to the right dose of the Xcopri, and then we can start weaning him off the zomethazine. But he's not there yet. And then he takes the clonazepam, a 0.5 milligram dose of that just at bedtime right now, to again give him, because it has a longer shelf life in his body, to help give him some extra protection from any subsequent seizures. But again, that's just temporary. It will go away. So
you're so much like a nurse.
I have to be.
You have all of the
but that's just to give you a little taste of but that's just to give your listeners a little detail of what it's like.
I know.
You have to be a nurse. You do have to learn to be a nurse and a caregiver. You're watching the meds. You're calling in to the doctor when something happens, so they know what's going on. Because if a medication if they're having adverse side effects, or they're having a rash, or they can't breathe, or something like that, you're definitely going to the ER. You're notifying the doctor to stop, that we're stopping the medication, or we're still having so many breakthrough seizures, then we're definitely amping up on calling the doctor and maybe getting him onto another drug as fast as possible. Because the idea is we're trying to go for a stabilization. With epilepsy, it's a chronic illness. It's lifelong. Once you get it, it'll never go away. You can go years without a seizure, but you still have to be on meds or have a device placement or surgery or whatever the case may be. A plan, because it's still, you have to keep it in check. If you don't, it can get out of control. And SUDEP is real. Sudden unexplained death with epilepsy can happen.
It's kind of like diabetes. Once you get it, you've got it for life.
Most chronic illnesses are hypothyroidism and IBS. I'm going to be on medicine for the rest of my life and watching my diet for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
It's a chronic illness. There's no magic cure.
No. And epilepsy, I mean, it's been around for so long and everybody knows the word, but we really don't know much about it.
No, and that's the stigma. People look fine, but people still will be like, why are you always missing work? Why are you always calling in? Why are you not coming? Why are you not going out to do things?
Yeah.
It's not that they don't want to, but maybe they're avoiding, because people have different triggers. Some people are triggered by flashing lights or certain sounds. So if their loved ones or families want them to go out and do an activity where those triggers are involved, they're not going to go and do that, because that's going to throw them into a seizure.
Yeah.
And my husband he works in customer service. He works in a gas station. So limiting the amount of hours he has to deal with cranky, rude, disrespectful customers, or who are impatient, or even just the stressful environment, even if the customers aren't rude, that pace of, I got to get through everything. It's stressful.
That anxiety of it.
Yeah. The anxiety of it. Yes, exactly. So limiting that. So we want him to still have the ability to work the set number of days that we can on part-time, so he can still bring in income and just feel like he's contributing to our family financially. But at the same time, he is not in a place ever again where he's going to work 40 plus hours a week. That's too much. Yeah. His body will not tolerate that anymore.
Can you tell the listeners what it's like to have a spouse that you're now a caregiver for? We talked about it just backstage before we came on, and it's definitely something different looking after your parents or having to make decisions for them. But having to make decisions about your own husband is definitely different.
Linda, just a second.
Yeah.
What, sweetie?
It's definitely
I'm not done.
A decision that you're going to have to make for your daughter, like she came in, or you're going to have to make for your husband or for yourself. And how do you keep that love? Like, you can't just keep giving to somebody all the time. And your husband is still pretty good.
Yes.
Functioning. But what about listeners who aren't? I mean, that's a life-changing.
It's tough. My husband's still pretty good, but we have had impacts in other areas. When you go through a chronic illness and you're dealing with the illness, it impacts you physically and emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, but also impacts your family financially. But it can also impact, because it's your spouse, it can impact your intimacy. So libido, I'm just going to go there, your libido. So the medications that my husband is on to control his epilepsy, which are needed, it has messed with his libido, and it just messes with his mood, and it's not his fault. And that's another thing, you already have, my husband's already at that age, for men, with their libido after 50, it goes down anyway. 40 to 50, it already goes down anyway, just naturally, that if you're healthy, otherwise, things. So you're dealing with that. And do men take Viagra and things like that, or sildenafil, which is generic Viagra, things like that. And my husband has utilized some of those resources at times. But and we've dealt with that, with us having an age gap. That's a hard thing. But then you add on a chronic illness that messes with that even more.
Yeah.
That's tough. And it's, and and also just feeling, because it changes your body with the medications you're on, you might have the side effect of weight gain, or maybe you're a little swollen, you don't look as attractive, maybe you might have that struggle. That's something to consider too, and it's tough. And
Yeah.
so there is that. I am a caregiver, and I do need to make sure my husband takes care of, but it's also my job as his wife to go, listen, this illness is not your fault, and you're still the man I married, and that I
Yeah.
love you so much, and you want to still input that desire. My body's changed too. I went through a cesarean when I had my daughter, and I got up to 220 pounds. I'm only 5 foot tall, and I'm still not back up to my baseline because of all the stress and my IBS. I'm still
Yeah.
struggling with my weight. But I'm learning to, but my body will I've never been a size 2, 4, or 0, and I never will be. And I'm just learning to accept that. But that doesn't mean I still can't be comfortable and
In your
healthy in the
own
body,
skin.
in my
Yeah.
own skin. I
To
mean, honestly,
whatever what
I
that
do
ever
want to
looks like.
do, that doesn't mean that I'm giving myself license to binge all the bad food, but I still am
Yeah.
going to try to exercise when I can, hydrate with a lot of water, taking my medications to keep my gut health in check so I'm not getting flare-ups of my IBS. And I'm still doing my wellness visits to make sure we're doing everything we can to keep me at a healthy level. But it is what it is. And my
Yeah.
husband fortunately sees that he's like, okay, I'm not expecting you to be a supermodel. That's not what I married. So it's about still loving your spouse through it all and still
Yeah.
seeing them as the person that you married. Yeah, things have changed, and yeah, things will impact as you, even if let's take the chronic illness out of the puzzle. Even if you were normal, as it were, quote unquote, normal, you would still be dealing with those changes and having to deal with libido issues and things like that
Oh yeah,
because of
yeah.
aging. So that's still on the table anyway. So I think with a chronic illness, I think those things are still important to keep in mind. I mean, yes, they might be um, increased um, or triggered a little sooner and a little faster than you might like,
Yeah.
but it still doesn't mean that life still can't be good and still life can't be beautiful. I still think my husband's the most handsome man on God's green earth. He loves me and accepts me for who I am, which I appreciate, because I definitely had some self some what's the word, some image issues, self-confidence issues, if you will, when we got married. And my husband just loves me for me. He loves my personality versus, how I look or
You're
how I
right.
will never look, type thing.
Right.
So I think that's important. Your spouse needs you. Some days are going to be hard. And I think it's important to just soak up those good moments, when you can be intimate, when you have a good day where your spouse is not, when your spouse
Feeling.
is not feeling, not feeling terrible from the side effects of the medication or having a
Yeah.
lot of seizures, and you're able to just have fun and laugh and giggle and play with your children and just be in, maybe not physically like you're making love per se, but even just holding
There's
their
other
hand.
intimacy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's other intimacies, going out to dinner, reminiscing, or doing something that's just you. Maybe even
Mhm.
if it's just going out for a date, maybe getting childcare for one night and going out to dinner and going out to a movie, or just doing something. My husband and I, we've even had time where we just wanted to have some alone time. And so we've booked out a hotel and left our daughter with grandma and grandpa before. We've done that even. So I'll just be
Yeah.
brutally honest. So, there's
Yeah.
different types of way to feed that
Different ways.
intimacy. And and it's important. Just your intimacy level with your spouse still needs to be there and still needs to be a priority. Just as important as not skipping wellness visits for yourself with your primary doctor, not making sure you're hydrated and fueling
Yeah.
your body with the right kinds of protein and getting enough sleep and exercising, just as important as tapping into mental health resources that will help you cope mentally, whether it's a
For
counselor,
yourself. Yeah.
therapist, or medication, and spiritually tapping into your congregation of faith, and even just outsourcing what you don't need on your plate. If you don't have the capacity to handle something, kick in home health, kick in hospice. We have, what we've done is, well, this was actually in place when we moved in because of my dad taking care of my mom. They did have hospice, but because they got to the point where my dad physically couldn't do the lawn mowing anymore, or deep clean the house anymore. We have one lady still that my dad hired, two ladies actually. One comes in to do some one-on-one stuff with my dad on Tuesdays, and then another one comes in bi-weekly on Fridays to deep clean our house. And when we moved in, my dad understanding everything I'm dealing with as a spousal caregiver and a stay-at-home mom. He's like,
Yeah.
I'm making the executive decision that I'm going to keep paying for those services for us because as a family, we have other things to worry about and you don't need anything else. I mean, I still keep up on cleaning and I do much what I can and I do most of the cooking in the family now. But my dad made the executive decision to do that. And then we have people, and then because of the heat, with chronic illness, a lot of people can't physically handle the heat very well. So
No.
we're in summertime, it's triple digits. My dad hired prior to when things were going down with my mom's decline in health and before she passed away, was hiring some people from his church that come and mow our lawn once a week. And we're keeping those services well because even though my husband is 15 to 20 years younger than my dad, because of his epilepsy, we don't know when he's going to have a seizure. And again, he can't tolerate the heat very well. It's not good for his epilepsy either. So
No.
my dad said, nope, we're going to keep that service too. So get creative. Outsourcing is not a bad thing. It's a form of self-care. It's allowing you to have more time to
doing
do
the other things.
Yeah. Outsourcing groceries. There's times where like it's been a hard week where maybe we've had a lot going on. And the last thing I want to do is waste 2 hours of my time driving into town, spending an hour at the grocery store, then coming back home and having to unload everything. Pay the fee and order your groceries. Fred Meyer, Albertsons. There's so many now that are offering an online service. You can order online, and you have two options. You can usually pay like a small fee, which is worth it. Pay the fee because you're investing in your self-care. Pay the silly fee. Order your groceries online, have them come to your house, or if you prefer, or schedule a pickup time and you can just go to the store and pick them up. So
on your way home or something.
Yeah. Like if you know you're going to be out for a medical appointment, let's say, because that does happen as a caregiver, you have more medical appointments. I mean, for us, it's interesting. We're still doing a lot of online because of COVID. But if you are still going in for medical appointments, and you know you're going to be out, go, okay, I'm going to set it for 3:00 because our appointment will be done at 2:30. So on the way home, we'll pick up the groceries. Boom. And all you have to worry about is unloading your car and putting them away. So outsource. Outsource is a self-care word.
Absolutely.
And it's not selfish, okay? It's okay to outsource because realistically, think about all the stuff like we've talked about on this call.
Yes.
There is a lot of stuff that you are dealing with as a mom, as a caregiver.
Yeah.
And if you can
yourself.
and yourself, prioritizing yourself. And if taking off 2 or 3 things, I covered like 2 or 3 things right there. Outsourcing home health, outsourcing, yard work, groceries.
Yard work and stuff.
That's taking some things off your plate. And if
or
that
snow
helps
plow
you,
or whatever it might
snow
be.
plow, whatever it might be. Yeah. And get creative. I know we don't live close to our church anymore because we live in a different town than our church. That's about 15-20 minute drive away. But when we were living in the same town as our church, they had a food bank. And so there were a few times when we were dealing with being tight on trying to pay off some medical bills and get what my husband needs for managing his illness. We were a little tight where we couldn't get food. So we leveraged that food bank for a season. And there was nothing wrong with that. So plug into your congregation of faith or other churches or congregations of faith in your town or community. That's a great resource. Community centers are good. There's programs there. And also check in your area. Another place, if you're really being hit hard right now with COVID still going on, inflation and gas and everything, check into some of those resources as well for programs where they will help you with your utility bills and your rent or mortgage payments. There's a few programs. Okay. There's a few programs there. So if you are in a bind financially where you're struggling to pay your bills, I know for us, there's 2 church programs I looked at. They were tapped out because when this happened for us, when we were transitioning, it was right in the thick of the pandemic. It was so bad. So those resources were tapped out because there was an influx of families, obviously, that were needed because of COVID being shut down, not being able to work. And so money's not coming in and they can't pay their utilities or rent. So there were some programs that you can qualify for. You might have to give, at least for the programs I looked at, you had to prove loss of income with some documentation, but it wasn't too bad. Just, basically sending in some forms and some proof of your utility bills and what they would run. And that's all you had to do.
So there's different different options out there for people,
Yeah.
basically.
So look online and look in your area to see locally what is available. And
Or your
obviously with
church, I
your
guess,
church,
would
congregation of
have
faith. Yeah,
ideas as well.
I know locally there was for a while there was I think a synagogue that was offering like a food pantry or a free source like once a month or something too. So
Right.
look at not just your local church or your specific community of faith. Look at other resources because they're trying to, and they will serve anybody, usually
Yeah.
too. They don't just keep it to their just leader of faith. They're trying to help the
Yeah.
community in general. So that's another option as well.
Especially important when something like this hits, and
Unprepared, yeah, when the
sometimes
unexpected. Yeah.
you just have to make things work somehow, some way. So,
Sometimes you have to be creative and it's
yeah.
not easy.
And it's not lifetime. It could just be, a month or two or 6
Mm-hmm.
months or a year, or,
Absolutely. Yeah.
it doesn't
Sometimes,
have to be forever.
yeah, yeah. And and again, please don't feel shame for need to leverage these resources. I remember a story that was so palpable for me in Sunday service one morning. We were talking about our care house. That's our outreach ministry, one of the outreach ministries in our church. And this guy that I knew from my young adult group at the time, he shared a story about how he was just so heartbroken because he had volunteered that past week at the food pantry at the care house. And he said, it was so hard. I'm so glad we have this ministry, but I feel for the people that we serve, because he said he was heartbroken for this gentleman that came in. He had like 2 or 3 children. His work had laid him off or something like that. And so he couldn't have food for his family. And he felt so guilty and ashamed for needing to utilize a food pantry to feed his family. And he said, I talked with him and I tried to encourage him the best I could, of realizing, hey, this is not your fault. You didn't choose. It's not like you quit your job. Your
Yeah.
company laid you off. It's not your fault. And you are still being open enough and willing enough to not let your family starve and utilize a food pantry. That's what we're here for. So if you need us again, come back next week. We'll give you a box of food to feed your family for a week. That's what we're about.
Absolutely.
So there's no shame. These resources are for the unexpected. My tagline for my business is prepare for the unexpected. And that's what this is about, is whatever resources you need to be prepared or prepare for the unexpected. That's what it's about. And that's what we want.
Exactly. Well, we sure do, in all sorts of ways.
Absolutely.
And I'm about being prepared before it happens, and just to give it some thought and have those conversations. And by me putting it out there, I think people are going to start talking about it.
I agree. Absolutely.
It's more of on the forefront of your thoughts to say, oh, well, it's going to bug you. It's going to be in your mind now. And you're going to think, oh, I should really think about that a little bit more. It's not, these family conversations that I talk about aren't like do it all at once kind of thing. They are
but just start to think.
Start to think.
Yeah, start to think about what you want. Yeah.
Talk about it. Yeah. And you're lucky to have a husband that you can still talk about it to,
Absolutely.
What happens
Talking about what happens with
couldn't?
X, Y, and Z. Yeah. What happens if my husband can't work? What if my husband
can't talk?
Can't talk? What do you want?
If
Yeah. Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be buried? Do you want to donate your organs? That's another thing that is not talked about. Do you want to bless somebody else with your organs that do work? So,
absolutely.
Or like what my mom did, because she had so many chronic illnesses.
Did she donate hers?
Well, she wanted to donate her body because her sister did. Her sister died of rheumatoid arthritis and a lot of complications. She died young too, in her 60s. And she donated her body to science for them to study, to hopefully maybe give some other clues by studying her body to see if they can get a breakthrough for somebody else that's struggling with some of these similar things. And my mom wanted to too, but there was something happened and they couldn't have that happen because of COVID. Obviously. So
COVID changed a lot of things.
Yeah. So, but even those conversations, mean, I can't speak of like how long that's going to be, that maybe with COVID that people aren't going to take bodies because of COVID, but still, just think about those questions. Do they want to be cremated? Do they want to have a memorial service? What if they have an estate? Yeah, like my dad and I, it's interesting. My dad and I are having this conversation because that's a little bit more at the forefront, because he's he is over 65. He is 70, 71. And because my dad died, he's made it very clear the housing market is out of this world. And so as the heir for his estate, this house will be mine when he passes away. That's the way it's signed up. And mom and dad and I talked years ago about, they said, okay, now listen, whatever the time of season you're in, if you want to sell the house, we'll accept that. If you need a house, we rented the majority of our marriage until we moved in, and we're paying my dad rent. We're treating him like a landlord for right now. But when we do take over the estate, we'll take over everything, the mortgage, the house payment, thing like that.
Yeah.
And dad's made it very clear. It's like, I mean, do you want to stay? Are you going to stay? It's like, Dad, this is where you and Mama are. Now that I'm living here, I can't think of selling this house. Because we can't afford to buy a house right now with how this market has just, because of inflation, it's so expensive. No, we can't. When we did try a couple years ago, and it was the lowest that we could, we qualified for a $200,000 loan. But people don't think about, just because you qualify for that loan, can you make that mortgage payment? I crunched the numbers, and we couldn't do it. We couldn't do it on the income. And this was like 3 or 4 years before my husband got sick. So this house that we have now, that we've been blessed with being able to have more time with my dad by moving in with him and having resource expenses, of not having to pay so many expenses, has been a blessing, because, I promised Mom that I would take care of Dad. Yeah. And this house is perfect, with just because it's one story. Dad has his own room. I can take care of him when we do need to kick in hospice years down the road for him.
Yeah.
And I have an office, and so we have a place to raise our daughter. So it's
perfect.
It's perfect. And so we're not going to leave. This is a great, nice, quiet community to raise our family. And that's
awesome.
Yeah. So God has blessed us. So we're going to stay here.
That's for sure. He sure has, or she. Somebody has. An angel has somewhere up there. Mm-hmm. Melissa, what kind of last minute messages would you like to give the listeners for all of what you've gone through now?
I would say the biggest thing I just want to let them know is that you're not alone. Okay. Caregiving unexpectedly, whether it's your parent, whether it's your grandparents, whether it's your spouse, whether it's especially cancer for a kid, for one of your children, or a special needs situation, or an injury, a cataclysmic injury with somebody in your family. It's not easy. It's not fun.
No.
But it's not your fault. Okay. So I just want you to know that you're not alone, and that there's resources out there, and that I am not going to stop fighting until more people know that these situations exist, so we can change the landscape on the state level, the federal level, and the worldwide level, that these situations exist, and there needs to be better programs in place to help financially, but also not just financially, but also mentally and emotionally, to cope with these situations. That's the whole reason my business exists. I created my business out of lack of resources that I could find that match my situation. I could find stuff for stay-at-home moms, but it was more curtailed towards moms who had made that pre-planned decision prior to having children with their spouse that they were going to stay at home because the husband made such a good income, and to avoid daycare, which even here where I live is unthinkably expensive. As much as a rent or mortgage payment, forget it. Then I found caregiving stuff, but again, it was more towards that demographic for your parents or grandparents, or for a sick kid. I'm not saying those in-between. Not the in-between. So I wanted to be the coach and mentor that nobody else had, and the advocate for awareness about this illness. As I've been learning more and more about epilepsy, I want to put chronic illnesses in the forefront, in the limelight, where people can't say no that it does exist.
Yeah.
And so to get more awareness around it.
Tell us about your program.
So my Finding Your Balance program is amazing. I'm so excited about it. Doors are opening again on the 22nd of August. So get on the wait list. And I basically teach you how to be prompt. That's my acronym. So preparing for the unexpected, reaching out for support, getting organized at home, managing your busy schedule, prioritizing self-care, and then telling your story to both heal and raise awareness. And I'm not about cookie cutter, one size fits all approaches. That drives me up the wall. Your girl will not go for that. So I will be teaching you with my program. You get the modules, and you get a couple of my free digital resources that you get to download for free. But the cool thing is when you sign up, you get 1 month of one-on-one Voxer voice message coaching with me 5 or 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. So anytime you have a question, I am there alongside you. You get to hear my voice versus just a text or maybe a Zoom call. Not to say that those aren't beneficial, but
Yeah.
things happen day to day, and you need to be able to sometimes just hear someone
Tap
else's
in.
voice
You
and
want to
tap in
tap into something.
and go like, okay, you can, so that way you can go, Melissa, my toddler's about ready to drive me at the wall because she got into the glue again, or Melissa, my husband or my spouse just had another episode, and I just called my 911 again, and it's scary. It was so bad this time, and I don't know what's going to happen. I just need someone safe to talk to through this situation for
That
support,
understands. I mean,
that
that's the whole
understands that
problem,
situation.
right?
So your girl will be in your corner, and I will help you get a realistic motherhood and spousal caregiving routine that works for you. And this program is retailed at $1,800. You're getting it for $197, or 2 payments of $98.50. So
It's a great
it's
deal.
exciting. I'm
Yeah.
excited. I'm so
Yeah.
excited. It's going to be great. It's going to be great.
That's awesome, Melissa. Thank you for sharing that. That's perfect. Well, listeners, it's about time that we could talk to Melissa for forever on the subject of caregiving. I know we could for sure,
Oh,
but I
absolutely. Don't get your girl started.
for sure. But we have to close it off at some point, and we'll have her come back with an update, I'm sure, in the next few months. Maybe before Christmas, we'll find out how things are going or something like that. But thank you. Thank you so much, Melissa, for coming on our show. I really, really appreciate your time and your story and your tricks and tips for other people. That's really important.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And just a little side note, if you do have questions, leave them in the comments below, and
Well,
Tina can get them to me, and I could answer those for you.
sure. And her description and everything is down below for all our listeners as well. And I wanted to mention, I wanted to thank our listeners from United States and Canada, and our German listeners as well, because our third biggest group of listeners are from Germany. So meine deutsche Freunde sind in unserem Podcast willkommen. Wenn Sie Kommentare haben, können Sie gern Fragen stellen. Also danke für deine Freundschaft und danke fürs Zuhören, meine deutsche Freunde. So thank you so very, very, very much. And if you were thinking about that special someone right now that you're watching the show and you haven't talked to them in a while and you haven't spoken to them, please pick up the phone. We still have phones. Knock on their door, FaceTime them, whatever it is, and tell them how much you love them and care about them, because you don't know what tomorrow might bring. So stay tuned for our podcast and our live streams. We have great conversations and with some of the most interesting and accomplished people in the world, just like Melissa here, who's been able to give us an insight of what it's like to be a mom, an entrepreneur, and a caregiver, and a nurse, and a wife, all wrapped up in one. That's a lot of roles there. Nobody's Superman, nobody's Supergirl in this world, so expect the unexpected. And thank you again to all of our listeners. Make sure you click on that click on that subscribe button there down below, because then you make sure you get to see our next videos. We are on all podcast platforms: YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, and we have a Facebook group for our like-minded community that can talk about situations that they're dealing with each other. So thank you for sharing your time with us. I always end with Carol Burnett, because she's such a beautiful and a funny lady. So funny. And you know who she is too, Melissa.
Yep, she's hilarious.
I'm so glad we had this time together just to have a laugh or sing a song. Seems we just get started, and before you know it, comes a time we have to say so long. So long, everybody. So long till next time. Expect the unexpected, and stay safe and be kind. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.